Cool.
Very good.
So, hello, my name is Vasilios Kosmakos. I'm with the Summer Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Today is April 22nd, 2022. Who does the pleasure with us speaking with today?
My name is Kevin Fallon.
Nice to meet you, Kevin.
Nice to meet you.
So if you can begin by telling me just a little bit about, who you're associated with and the type of work you do.
Sure. I'm associated with St. Charles Borromeo. It's a Catholic church in Cape Charles. And we work with St. Peter the Apostle, which is where we're sitting, and Father Michael Imperial. He is kind of our farm worker volunteer leader, and so we're part of his team that provides services to the camp workers. So that's how I fit in.
So discuss kind of the type of services you help provide.
So our primary goal is to bring spiritual services to the camps, but last summer, being my first summer, my wife and I are kind of teamed up for doing this. We provided food, we provided clothing, provided shoes, and in some cases just some monetary donations, depending on what we had to distribute. But and then we just basically went out to the camps to mingle and create relationships along with our other services. So.
And for the audience that's listening, kind of discuss these camps. So are they labor camps? What are they?
Yeah, they are labor camps that they're camps in the sense that they're labor camps, but it's where the farm workers live while they provide farm labor in the fields that are surrounding the Eastern Shore area. There's no real work going on in these camps per se, like you might hear the connotation of a labor camp, but it's where they live. They set up their homes for 3, 6, 9 months out of the year, and so we go into those camps and try to assess their needs and try to provide them to the extent that we can. Anything that makes them feel a little bit more like at home or at least part of the community.
So you mentioned that, not only do you provide kind of spiritual help, but you also do a lot of kind of physical stuff, money, food, clothes, etc.
Yeah.
Discuss the specific kind of needs that you see in these communities and what your organization does directly to fill those needs.
So we had a really cool experience last year. Let's go with the spiritual need. My wife is a retired labor and delivery nurse, and she immediately gravitated toward this young woman who was pregnant and very visible and almost ready to, gave you the impression she was ready to deliver any minute. So she made a connection with her and came up with a plan to help provide some of the care and nurturing that you need, a mother, or expecting mother might need. Got her vitals, if you will, and assessed where she was in terms of the real point of delivery. Gave her information about how to proceed from that point forward, who to go see. She had done some research on the local hospital care here, and we were able to provide some information for her for that. So we kind of connected her to where she needed to go for her delivery. Then after the baby was born, we had really formed a relationship with the mother and the father, Maria and Carlos, and we kept seeing them and we kept asking them what needs they had. And so, of course, with a new baby, they needed diapers, they needed formulas, they needed, well, not so much formula because she was going to breastfeed, but the car carrier, the car seats, and a little pack and play crib. So we had some connections across the bay. Catholic Charities was the donator of the supplies, but we had a connection over there who could get to Catholic Charities and came up with a nice care package that not only had all the diapers and the little clothes and everything that goes with that, but also, a car seat and a host of other things, which was really a cool experience to be able to share that with them. And then from there, we would see them at Camp Mass regularly, and by the end of the summertime, they were ready to have their baby baptized, Juan Carlos, and they asked us to be the godparents, or compadres and comadres, which was, for us, being very new to this whole service-oriented kind of project, was kind of incredible for us. We got direct feedback from the people we were supporting in a very tangible way, and their form of their love for us, for what we did for them, which was quite unexpected. So that was a small story of how we helped out last year, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a wonderful story. Generally, what are the type of needs that you see in the camps?
Say?
What are the types of needs you see generally in the camps?
Types of needs in the camps would be, so one of the things we're going to try to do this year, we saw when we handed out shoes, tennis shoes last year, our first reaction was, okay, we showed up with like maybe 70 pairs of tennis shoes, and there probably were 80 to 100 people. And so our first reaction was like, okay, hey, one pair of shoes each, that's all we can do right now. But we realized that they weren't taking them to be greedy, they were taking them because they needed it. So they would go in the fields, and the shoes that they would wear, they were just regular running shoes or tennis shoes. By the time they came out of the fields, a day or two later, you can imagine how they looked. They were just caked with mud and dirt, and they needed to be washed out. And so the interesting thing you would see is on the roofs of these brick buildings or concrete buildings that were their housing facilities were tennis shoes. And it took us a while to figure out, well, why are tennis shoes on the roof? Well, they'd wash their tennis shoes out, they'd put them on the roof to dry. That's where the most direct sun would hit, and they could dry those. So that was their dryer, so to speak. So a big need that we came to realize was that they need footwear that would really help them get into the fields and come out of the fields and be able to rinse off and do use something that would allow that to be a quick process. So our goal this year is we've gone out and bought a couple pairs of these ankle-high boots, and we're going to trial fit some of those with the migrant workers to see if that could be a solution for them. They look like they would. They're very low aggressive tread, so they won't get really caked with muds, but it looks like something that they could wear in the fields, go home, rinse off, and have it dry by the next morning and be comfortable enough to work all day long. So that was one specific need that we saw. We learned our first take was, they're taking more than they needed, but really they were only taking what they absolutely needed. And once we understood that, we were thinking about ways of how we could help fix that need. So that's one particular area.
So you provided clothes to a lot of these kind of
Yes, we did.
individuals?
So we would get donations of, T-shirts, sweatshirts, and hats were the primary items donated. Long sleeve T-shirts. They're in the fields all day, and it's not so much that they weren't keeping warm, but they were keeping sun off, chemicals off, the plant, even if there were no chemicals, just the plant irritations from the skin. Highly important piece of garment for the workers. Then for some of them, they stayed until October, November. And so the season changing, you would think of farm workers being out in the sun in summertime, and then when this summer goes away, that they would go away, but they don't. They stick around. The tomato crops, for example, pick all the way through October, and so when the nights got cold, the needs turned to more things like sweatshirts and jackets. So we would try to use our network to put a call out for anybody who has sweatshirts or jackets to, let us know. We'll come pick those up, and then we'll take them to the camp and distribute those. So that's the clothing was either for the picking in the fields and/or for just staying warm at night, because the temperature is really warm in the day but chilly at night.
And discuss how you kind of fell into this kind of volunteer role. I mean, this is a very specific kind of, way to help out. I mean, it's a very specific kind of cause to be helping. I mean, you're obviously not Hispanic.
Right.
How did you end up here?
So, great story. I wish my wife was here to tell that part of the story. My father-in-law, who was probably the second greatest guy beside my dad, when my dad passed away, he really became my dad. Well, he worked over here as a brethren minister, and he worked in a program called Head Start, which was the early stages of some of the farm work ministry we're doing today. So I really got into it because of my wife, who wanted to follow the footsteps of her father. So we retired 2020 and decided that we were going to move over to the Eastern Shore. We had connections over here anyway because my father-in-law came over here.
Were you from Virginia originally? Where'd you move from?
Yeah, I moved from Williamsburg, Virginia.
Cool.
And my wife's father had set up a little beach cottage here. And so we actually sold our house in Williamsburg, moved into that little beach cottage, and there we live, and we serve St. Charles, and we serve Father Imperial. It's very rewarding and very great way to do retirement, if you will. So, yeah, I got into it because of my wife and my connection to my wife's father.
So you serve, you work with Michael Imperial, with Father Imperial.
Yeah.
But do you have a specific role in the organization? So are you kind of like the head logistics guy, or what specifically do you do?
So,
Like just more of a common volunteer? Or?
So like I described earlier, there are 3 churches, Catholic churches, that Father kind of is the lead pastor or priest for. So I'm the representative. My wife and I are the migrant ministers at St. Charles. So that's our official title, if you wanted the official title. So we serve St. Charles, but Father Imperial is our director, if you will. So we will coordinate all the logistics for any things going on in 3 camps, not Ames, but KNC at Cheriton, Church Neck, and there's another one, I can't remember the name, but there's 3 camps that we're responsible for. So if we have a mass, Carrie and I have to go to the camp, put flyers out there, announce the time of the mass, make connections with the workers and to make sure that they're there, and then we'll get. Last year the big thing was watermelons. We'd get 4 or 5 watermelons and cut them up and bring them out with ice water so that they had a nice, refreshing treat after Mass. We'd set the Mass up. Father Imperial would come out at a certain time. We would do the Mass and then have a little fellowship after the Mass and then go home. And so we would repeat that, at whatever camp, and we would predicate it on Father's schedule. So kind of how things work. So yeah, we were logistics, if you will, or we were the directors of those camps, if you will, whatever title would fits. But
very cool.
Yeah.
And how many people would you say you serve?
So KMC was probably around 250 at the height, 250 to 280 people at the height of it. The other 2 camps together might have been around 80 combined. So
roughly 400,
350-ish, maybe close to 400. Depends on the point in time, because during the year, it'll be a small crowd that comes early, then in the middle or the heart of the summer, it's a large crowd. You get the higher number, and then as the weather changes, they move on, and the numbers go back down.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think. So this is so you said this is a relatively new thing, right? 2020.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like year by year you are kind of growing, kind of this and expanding this these kind of outreach efforts. You know, 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, kind of break it down for me. Where do you see this growing?
Where do I see us going?
Yeah, 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years.
Yeah. So I got this. I pinpoint my start in 2020, but I'll put it back to what my father-in-law was doing because he would carry us. My wife and I have been married for 42 years, and he would carry us over here, you know, as young newlyweds, as 10 years married, as whatever with our kids, and share that experience with us. So we've been doing that for quite some time, and I honestly think that our idea of retirement from a 1, 3, 5, 10, 15-year experience is we're going to be right here. And our goal is that we get a better command of the language, that we learn more about how to serve the needs of the farm worker.
Do you speak any Spanish?
Poquito. That's I know that word.
Let's put you on the spot.
No, that's okay because we've learned. I had to take a fella across the bay last year, and he had a problem with his phone, and the only way he could solve it was to go over there to a service provider. Well, I got asked to do that. I'm like, okay, but I don't speak very much. But he and I had the best 5 hours of at least my life. We went over there. We got everything done that we needed to get done, and we taught each other words in English and Spanish as we did it. And so if I look at last year and say that at the very beginning we didn't know any Spanish, you know, we made the fatal error of writing some things out. Hi, my name is Kevin, and then, you know, we would say that in Spanish. Well, guess what we got in return? I mean, they start talking in Spanish, and it's so fast, and we have no idea what they're saying, so we just walked into a trap. Like, we gave them the impression that we knew the language, and we really didn't. The phone was a godsend, so it helped us translate. And then we picked things up. You just pick things up. You pick enough up to learn how to communicate with each other. So I think that's really our long-term goal, is to get through that so that we can really come in here and do what they need, not what we want to do, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Focusing on their needs and having them kind of lead the pack, you know, and then you kind of just support them.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So you kind of mentioned how not only did your father-in-law brought you into this, he kind of sucked you in. He sucked you in.
Yeah, he did.
But then he also mentioned how you sucked your kids in.
Yeah.
Right. So kind of talk about kind of that, you know, dynamic, right? So like, you know, how have your kids benefited from all this work that you've been doing?
Well,
involved in that, or
yeah. So when we had 4 kids, and as they were growing up, they got caught up in the experience and seeing that. At the moment, the only involvement that they have right now is they hear the stories of mom and dad and what they're doing, and they're like, you guys do realize you're retired and you're supposed to be like going here, there, and not working like this, but they also realize the fulfillment that we get out of it. So I know that they're impacted in a way that they see mom and dad doing something that they love. So from that perspective, I think that's how they're impacted.
And, you know, just kind of through your own networks, right? Through your extended family, through your friends.
Yeah.
I mean, when they hear about the work you're doing, right? I mean, how do they kind of perceive all that? I mean, do you feel like you educate them at all? Do you
yes.
They're more aware?
Absolutely.
Because of your role through this
Absolutely.
stuff?
So I came from a family of 9. So
Wow.
I have 8 siblings that I get to share this with.
Wow.
And if I can reach into their resources to help do the work that we're doing, I do that. But they all appreciate, and they're very aware, are well aware of what we're doing, and they're not surprised that Carrie and I are doing what we're doing. So they're pretty supportive of what we're doing, and
That's wonderful.
but yeah, they're not surprised. Yeah.
Very cool. And do you, I guess I'll kind of just end this interview by kind of just asking you if you have any more, if there's anything you kind of want to say to the world, right? So anybody that's listening, you know, would you have to, you know, any final thoughts?
What would I say? I would say that, you know, we as humans on this earth, we have to figure out how to get along. And a lot of the reason we can't get along is the fear that we have with people that we don't know. And so don't be afraid of just jumping in and just seeing for yourself and learning. Instead of letting somebody else tell you how things are, just jump in yourself and ask, and then with an open mind and open heart, you know, try to understand your fellow man and see where it gets you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, with that, this concludes the interview. I really appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.